Hi, my name is David Knight, and welcome to those amazing Psalms. Psalm 58, Justice at Last. Yesterday, as I was preparing this video, it was Martin Luther King Day, and my morning news feed directed me to King's famous letter from a Birmingham jail, written 50 years ago. I read that letter for the first time yesterday, and in the middle of it I had two thoughts. The first is that this letter should be required reading for every thoughtful person in North America, especially followers of Jesus. It's thoroughly biblical and immensely relevant to our world today. The second thought was what a perfect intro for my comments on Psalm 58, which begins, Justice. Do you rulers know the meaning of the word? Do you judge fairly? No. You plot injustice in your hearts, and your hands spread violence throughout the land. This psalm is a passionate denunciation of corruption, in particular of civic officials who distort justice. Some are unscrupulous and downright crooked. Others simply uphold the status quo with laws that favor one group over another. Regardless, the net result is that powerless people are marginalized and cheated, resulting in anger and resentment, and communities torn by violence. Martin Luther King was imprisoned in Birmingham for demonstrating without a license. A group of white clergy challenged King's peaceful protest as unwise and untimely. King responded in this letter with biblical argument that, like the three Hebrews in Nebuchadnezzar's fiery furnace, we have a moral responsibility to expose and disobey unjust laws. Psalm 58 paints a picture of habitually corrupt leaders. Even from birth, the wicked go astray, spreading lies. Their venom is like the venom of a cobra that has stopped its ears, that will not heed the tune of the enchanter. What a graphic description of leaders who refuse to listen, who stop their ears against the truth or the cries of victims. They've lost their humanity. Their speech is as poison as snake venom. We might ask why Israel would bring such a harsh song like this into their worship practice. The reason is that justice lies very close to God's heart, and injustice in the community was an affront to God's name. Israel's vocation was to be a people who reflected God's justice in their society, not just retributive, but restorative justice and the healing of the community. Their laws were designed to protect every person with dignity as persons created in God's image. Upholding righteousness means calling out injustice and the abuse of power whenever it rears its snake-like head. If we are honest, as the Bible holds up its mirror, we recognize that it's not just civic officials who have a problem with power. We are all susceptible to its allure, naturally inclined to use whatever power we have to our own advantage. As Lord Acton reminds us, power tends to corrupt, and the stronger its hold on us, the less we notice its corrosive effects. 1,000 years after this psalm was written, the early church saw this psalm writ large in the trial of Jesus, the abuse of power, the false witnesses, the pretense of justice. They also saw Jesus standing in solidarity with victims of injustice everywhere, yet demonstrating a redemptive response, unmasking hypocrisy and cruelty, yet praying for forgiveness for the guilty. In verse 6, our psalmist prays in less merciful terms what he thinks God ought to do about it. Break off their fangs. Smash the jaws of these lions, O Lord. May they disappear like water into thirsty ground. He wants these villains just swept away. May they be like snails that dissolve into slime, like a stillborn child who will never see the sun. And then this grisly line, the godly will rejoice when they wash their feet in the blood of the wicked. You are probably as aghast as I am at that washing their feet in the blood of the wicked. But it's important that we feel the indignation in this prayer. As C.S. Lewis says, it's far better to see a furious man outraged by true evil than to keep diplomatic silence, or simply shrug off injustice as simply the way the world works. While the psalmist prays that God would remove evildoers, he does not take matters into his own hands, nor does he seek to incite others to violence. Vengeance is God's prerogative, and that keeps the community from spiraling into an endless cycle of revenge and counter-revenge. The psalm finishes with a sense of relief and hope. The godly will rejoice when they see injustice avenged. Then at last everyone will say, there truly is a reward for those who live for God. Surely there is a God who judges justly here on earth. The psalmist is confident that God will avenge injustice, that all human wrongs will eventually be put to rights. The brokenness of our world will be healed, and justice will fill the earth at last, as God brings to completion his mission to make all things new and good. And in the meantime, we have this psalm to inspire us to hunger and thirst for a more just and compassionate world, to practice mercy, to speak and listen to everyone with respect, and as Proverbs 31 says, to speak up for those who have no voice for themselves, and to ensure justice for those being crushed. And to pray as the early Christians prayed, "Come, Lord Jesus, come. May your will be done on earth as it is in heaven." Take care.